Hi, my name's Liv Berger, and this workshop is called Put Some Spring in Your Chair. And today's workshop isn't so much about learning new exercises on the chair, it's more about teaching tools. So we're going to be talking a lot about how to manipulate the springs on the chair to either challenge or support your clients in an exercise. In my years of teacher training and working with new hires in places that I've worked, I've noticed a lot of trainers don't really know how to manipulate the springs on the chair. In their training programs, they were often taught one set chair spring setting that's supposed to sort of be universal, and that's great if you're working in the same environment all the time and you kind of know your clients. The problem comes up when you have somebody with a special case, or you get a job someplace and you have a different kind of chair than you're used to. And as you see here, we actually have 3 different versions of chairs. This one's got handles, it's got 2 springs and all these settings here. This is kind of your more classic chair. It's got 3 settings on each side and 2 springs. This one's got also 2 springs, but the spring settings are in the center, and there's 4 of them. For a lot of new trainers, it kind of becomes a story of like, well, I don't know what to do with this. Where do I start? And how do I figure out what I learned from my training program and convert it to now this new piece of equipment that I'm working on, or this client that's in front of me. So before we look at a couple of exercises, let's look at kind of the configuration of just a basic chair. And the rules that we're going to learn for this basic chair work just as nicely with a chair like this that has 4 spring settings as opposed to 3 on each side. And believe it or not, there are actually some chairs with 4 springs and like 16 settings or something crazy like that too, which is great because it just gives you more choices. But if you don't really understand how the springs work and how to manipulate them, it can be quite confusing. So we're going to try to take the guesswork out of it today. All right, so just asking you guys this quick question. How many springs gives more tension? 1 spring or 2 springs?
2.
Very good. That seems obvious, right? But, okay, so if we were to start with 1 spring on, what do you think the very lightest spring tension could be, other than working with no springs, would be with 1 spring?
One down low?
Great. So the way this kind of works is lowest is lightest. So as we start to work the spring up, you're going to work with more tension. So right now it's on the very lightest tension it could be. What if we want to add a little bit more spring tension to it? If I can get it off. There we go. Where would we go from there to be just a little bit more tension?
Raise it.
Okay, so we would raise it up just 1. And then say that was nicely hooked on there and we just did an exercise. Let's say we wanted a little more spring setting. Where would we go from there?
Well, you can go up.
Right, so we have 1 more notch up here, right? So with 1 spring, we've just worked kind of the chain of, your lightest, lowest, a little bit more, as much tension as you can possibly get with 1 spring. Now what do you do?
Add another one.
Okay, so where do you go with it? Do you keep this one here and just add another one else someplace else, or where does it go from there?
I don't know. I might start with 2 low.
Great. So now we're going with 2 springs, but back to the bottom. Okay, so then we would take it, if I can get this off, all the way down. And we add this one also at the bottom. Then where does it go?
1 step at a time.
Perfect.
Right?
Great. So then you can just start walking up the chain again with 1 side, eventually adding the other side until you're at the top. The highest spring setting you could possibly work with, if I can see what I'm doing here, would be both springs on the top setting. So with that said, goodness, with that said, regardless of this one having 4 spring settings on each side, the rule still is the same. Start at the bottom with 1, work your way up. Then go back to the bottom with 2, start to work your way up 1 side and then up the other side, and you're good. So this kind of helps any chair that you have, you kind of have an understanding, like lowest, lightest, and going up from there. Now there's 2 different kinds of exercises that we tend to work with on the chair. Either exercises where you're lifting your body weight